Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be talking about the latest and also last release to come from Noisia. If you are not hip to the group or you just haven't really listened to electronic music like that before, Noisia is a trio and they come from the Netherlands. Back in the early 2000s, producers Nick Roos, Martin van Sonderen, and Thijs de Vleger came together to form the group that we now know as Noisia. Their music has grown exponentially since their first release, which was back in 2003. It was a single, the first song that they had released under this name. And they have dabbled in many different production styles and genres since then. Music ranging from dubstep to house, everything in between, although it always seems that drum and bass is consistently their favorite genre to produce. They've got accolades in the EDM community, if you ask me, due to many collaborations and their continued support of rising stars and growing artists. They've also dabbled in video game soundtracks, and their music makes appearances in games like Devil May Cry, Counter-Strike, Midnight Club Dub Edition, just to name a few, but there are several more. In my eyes, these guys are modern pioneers in the modern world of electronic music. They've been through so many eras in the industry and have managed to stay true to their unique and distinct sound, while also uplifting younger artists through their work in two separate record labels. As I hinted at before, this is a farewell album for Noisia, and I think that the album title Closer was a cool title. It can be interpreted in different ways. Closer, as in growing a stronger bond with another person, but also closer, hinting at the end of a show, the end of an era, the end of everything that they've done together. The album is a total of 20 tracks, sitting just under a runtime of about an hour and 20 minutes. And there's not a lot of lyrical content for me to cover here, so I'll mainly be touching on elements of production, sound design, and overall sonic direction. I will just give my highlights track by track, as per usual, starting with the very first one, which is entitled 3. This is a very sleek song featuring a lot of beautiful and soaring synth melodies that screams something like Blade Runner to me. Very Vangelis inspired. It's very beautiful, and all these sounds are so ethereal, and they come together in a very serene way to prime the listener for this futuristic and exhilarating journey that follows. We transition into track number 2, entitled Nova, featuring Camo and Crooked. This is a sleek drum and bass song featuring awesome breakbeats in what feels like an Arctic tundra. There's plenty of reverb on the synths, creating a very massive space, and there's the drums that anchor the listener and keep you grounded throughout the experience. There's no single melody here during the first half, but rather a blend of different sounds and notes that collectively create a general sense of melody. We've got a super crispy blip-type synth, super saws, and synth strings that all take turns swapping out and creating all of this interesting layered sense of melody. At the bridge, we can hear a very nice synth string. It's very sleek, hitting a beautiful melody, and then eventually we transition back into the main breakbeat section. The tonality creates a magical mood, one of wonder and mystery. What follows is track number 3, entitled Shibuya Pet Store, featuring the upbeats. The first melody of the song is super reminiscent of like the Gen 4 and Gen 5 Pokemon games. It's tough to explain, but to me the melody sounds like it was ripped out of Game Freak's soundtrack vault. The build-up after the intro swells. We are eventually introduced to the main synth, at which point the mix shrinks dramatically. The synth has plenty of automation to have the mix swell back up generally, accompanied by rushing wind-like white noise. I love the synths that we hear during the drive sections. They're crispy and they've got a ton of life to them. And the melody is syncopated and complemented nicely by the drums. I also enjoy how the drums change for the second drive section, the big drop. They feel more energetic, but they're just as smooth. This is a solid tune. Track number 4 is entitled Shift, featuring Imanu. The intro is cold and empty, featuring a vocal sample that feels like it's repeating the words "in my unconsciousness." It could also be "in mind unconsciousness." It's not very clear what the words are saying, but I think that's perfect. We're sucked into a dark and grimy dance section after this, featuring a few distinct bass timbres, and each is thick and aggressive in its own right. The drums match this energy, featuring thick kicks and hard-hitting snares. I love the sound design on the tune. It's just insane. There's no real melody here, just an amalgamation of aggressive synths that make me feel like, just imagine an angry wasp that's looking for the human that keeps swatting at them. This rings especially true for the second drop, the breakbeat section. And eventually we reach the outro, which is icy, as the mix is reduced to a crunchy saw synth that eventually just fades away. Track number 5 is entitled Horizon, featuring Skrillex, Tease, and Sleepnet. This song is a big tonal shift on the album, featuring a bright tonality, gorgeous synths, and pitched up vocal samples. I like the way the vocals sit high above the instrumental, like they're soaring way up there. The main drum groove has a clave type of flavor to it, and there's plenty of airy synths to provide a lot of fluff. There's many melodies on this song that blend together beautifully, as they're phased through each other in a way that makes the track feel like it's an electric orchestra. It's honestly a very gorgeous mix. Halfway into the tune, everything feels like it's blended into each other, and the mix gradually becomes more blurry. And then you hear a vocal come in that says the words, "'Cause I saw things in you that you couldn't see." After we hear these lines, we're guided back into the main drum groove, and here the instrumental gradually becomes less and less defined, becoming more dreamlike in a sense. We've got wavy record scratches here, bubbly drums and bass, of course, and a much wider mix that keeps expanding. It's a gorgeous tune, and in my opinion, a very high moment on this album. Track number 6 is entitled Cleansing, featuring Former. We've got a tonal 360 on this song compared to the last one. The melodies during the intro feel malevolent, almost mischievous in a way. They're also glitchy. And when the drums finally do come in, full force, we're introduced to a halftime groove, featuring a rather deep 808 type kick and a lovely snare to contrast. It's very snappy. We also have stuttering hi-hats that join the mix eventually. And underneath all of this lies the bass. Just imagine the basilisk from Harry Potter, the giant snake, slithering around in the Chamber of Secrets. That's what the bass sounds like. During the second half, we can hear an eerie melody that feels like it's a vocal sample. It's hard to pinpoint. And additionally, we've also got a flute melody that can be heard, and it's equally unsettling. The second beat drop raises the energy of the song overall, with added kick stutters that feel like heart palpitations just bumping through this wide mix. The instrumental is almost completely covered in fog, figuratively speaking, by the time we reach the end of the song. And the whole song sounds like the soundtrack for someone who's just hopelessly wandering the hallways of the back rooms, just stuck there. We move on to track number 7, which is entitled Foundations, featuring Meth Juice. This sleep tune is devoid of any conventional melody and is full of life and full of movement. The drums are richly layered, and I can't get over how organic they feel here. We've also got a punchy sub bass that pokes through the mix nicely. And laid on top of this are soft synth pads that feel like ocean waves. They're constantly washing over the breakbeats, kind of like a wavy drone. It's always playing the same tones, too. It doesn't change much. The mix is busy and is constantly moving. I think my favorite part of this song are the clicks that we hear during the end of the song. I can't tell what these sounds are, but they're used to accentuate the drum loops, and it works beautifully. The reverb creates a beautiful sense of massive space. Track number 8 is entitled Scrapped. The intro here feels stunted as the drums emphasize more a slower, like halftime type rhythm, and the synths aren't hitting on consistent rhythms the way you would expect them to with a groove like this. But once we get into the thick of the song, finally we are introduced to a more solid rhythm, and the drums have an emphasis on those heavy kicks on the first beat of every measure. I also noticed subtle pitched elements in some of the snares, which I can appreciate. They sound really good. And the synths seem to be guided by the drums, and the bass hits come in strong on certain beats, usually that first beat of every measure. You can hear this best during the second break section, that big drop, and the synths breathe along with the kicks. It works perfectly. I enjoy how big and crunchy the synths feel on the song. Just imagine a hungry cybernetic bear just looking for food. We transition into track number 9, which is entitled Shutters, featuring deliciously glitchy synths during the intro, a ton of arpeggios, and everything is stuttering and warped. It's an incredible blend of sound, and the drums guide the listener through this alien blend of unusual timbres. The melody appears towards the end of the song, and it's a soft timbre, much like a bowed string. It feels tiny and it's very high pitched. I would have liked for this tune to have been longer, but I'm happy with what we got. It almost feels like a fun interlude. We transition into track number 10, entitled Halcyon, featuring the upbeats. There's no clear melody on this nasty tune, but there's beautiful interstellar timbres that guide us through the intro, at the very least. It's an interesting blend of smooth and spacious pads, and there's crispy drums paired with crunchy saw basses. I love the way the bass punches the mix from underneath, like some deep thuds bumping the accompaniment in the gut. The final section is also a beautiful surprise, as in the last minute, the song completely transforms into a more melodic glitch hop tune, featuring fuzzy synth strings and that bring a very illuminating energy to the mix. It's a beautiful section that switches up the groove and energy. Overall, a very solid tune. Track number 11 is entitled Wordless, featuring Halogenics. This tune is very liquid, as it's gorgeously serene. The mix is beautiful. The synth string we hear during the intro is ethereal, and it feels a lot like a violin, but I can't tell exactly what it is. The drums are super clean and organic. Meanwhile, the background accompaniment is comprised of fluffy pads, vocal samples, and many soothing timbres. The bridge features the mix fading around the main melody, as if the listener is almost like waking up from a dream. The following melody that appears after this guides the listener through this foggy bridge and into the next drop. Here the bass feels more present, and the synth string does return. And the transition into the outro is gradual. The whole song just goes down like that bottle of water sitting on your nightstand next to your bed at like 3 a.m. That's what it feels like. Track number 12 is entitled Told You. This is a very playful tune featuring a funky synth melody that sits above the mix. The pad that envelops this main melody is syncopated, and it feels a lot like cotton candy. The drums are more subtle, but they're still crisp, and this is another super brief cut, another fun interlude, if you will. With this, we transition into track number 13, entitled Genghis, featuring Two Fingers. This is a dark tune that's full of life and energy. I especially love the wet drum fills that make appearances throughout the whole song, and they give the song a more like tribal feel, because they don't sound like your typical sample choices for drum and bass. The mix is wet, and during the drive sections, it becomes brighter with the appearance of these waspy pedal tones that we can hear. We can also hear some fuzzy drones in the distance, and there's a syncopated kick drum that struggles to keep you grounded, by design, of course. The music feels like it's stumbling forward in a drunken manner. This is like a wonderful acid tune that presents the psychonaut with an intimidating and robust atmosphere to soak in. It's an unsettling type of trance. There's so many different tones that come together to just keep you like in this lulled state, a trance-like state, especially during the outro, which is just haunting. If you hear it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's very beautiful, but in an ugly way. Track number 14 is entitled Pleasure Model, featuring Former. Here we've got a somber intro, as the mix is filled by a square wave drone that lulls the listener into another different type of trance. It's so round, this square wave, it's like a massive ball. There's an airy synth keyboard that joins from above, and we meet a deliciously thick synth sitting right in the center of the mix. Eventually, we can hear an awesome melody that sounds like a human voice singing the words Pleasure Model. It's hard to say if these are actual vocals that are thrown into a vocoder or some kind of auto-tune, or if it's a Vocaloid, but regardless, I love the sound of it. Giant super saws sneak into the mix, and immediately it's an explosion. And then the drums hit. This is where we get to the drop. It's an amazing halftime groove that sounds a lot like if classic dubstep and hybrid trap hit the fusion dance. It's also interesting how the drums here don't feel quantized. They've got a certain amount of life to them, almost as if it were like a live recording when they performed this to record in the session. There's also lovely snare rolls and other percussive hits that keep the energy up in between those kicks and those snares. And then we've also got soaring synths, hoovers, and stretched out vocal samples providing the background music. Underneath all of these sounds, we've got a massive sub bass, and it's an awesome mix that's full of energy, light, and I've got to say the drop sections are just masterful. We transition into track number 15, entitled Deep Down, featuring Face. We've got a wet synth ostinato that gradually swells here. It sounds wooden to me, almost like a giant electronic marimba. The mix grows into the first break section that drop, featuring punchy kicks and snares. There's a lovely saw bass that pumps up the mix. It's drenched with a chorus and it just sounds angry. It's almost as if the drop sections are what the Flash's heartbeat sounds like when he's asleep, if you want to think of it that way. I love the subtle clave groove of the song also. If you missed it during the most of the song, it becomes most apparent during the outro where the tempo is brought down significantly so that the song just slows down. It's a surprisingly bright mix, and it feels like strobe lights are just going off in a giant empty warehouse. Track number 16 is entitled Simplon, featuring Posage. We've got blippy synth ostinatos that guide the listener into that first beat drop. The basses and synths overwhelm the mix perfectly. The groove here is stunted. It's as if we're listening to the slow but steady walk of a woolly mammoth. The drums almost feel second to the sound design here, at least until they grow into a percussive orchestra that's full of frantic but perfectly synced energy. The bridge is gorgeously, it flips the synth ostinato on its head in a very beautiful way. As it gets dragged out, everything feels like it's moving in slow motion. The synth ostinato is sped up, but it gets slowed down here very well. It's mesmerizing, and it's a very bright moment on the song. And the music continues to stretch until it no longer can, and then the mix explodes into the second break. This second drop section feels even angrier and heavier than the first, although the groove has not changed. And the outro echoes the bridge in a very brief moment, and then suddenly the song is over. Then we transition into track number 17, which is entitled Caps Lock, featuring Black Sun Empire. The energy on this song is massive. We've got huge drum samples, and the basses hit hard. There's a fuzzy synth timbre playing a mischievous melody during the intro that's soon accompanied by a very bright keyboard, and this blends into the first drop. The drop is gigantic, featuring drums that hit like a brick wall. The melodies and bass hits are choppy, which allows for the drums to shine. It works perfectly and because it's so choppy. The bridge drastically brings the energy down very well, filling the mix with blurry lights and in the form of super saw pads and all sorts of windy type of sounds and feels. The second drop is just pure insanity. The drums explode with energy in a bombastic way, and somehow, I don't know how they did it, but they managed to make the bass sound even angrier here. The drop progressively calms down. This is where it peaks, and then it just kind of continues to calm down, and then we're quickly ushered into a fade out, and the song is over. Track number 18 is Supersonic VIP, featuring Skrillex, Josh Pan, and Dylan Brady. The original version of this banger was released as a single back in June 2021, almost a year ago. This version is a beautiful expansion on the original song, and the first half feels unchanged for the most part. I still haven't been able to tell if it's different or not. We've got a spacious mix featuring the silky vocals, synth strings, and wind-like white noise. The drums are smooth like butter, and they're layered beautifully, featuring a blend of hi-hats, crisp snares, and fat kicks that are bumping in your ears. The sound design for the synth melodies during the second drop is beautiful. The second section features an awesome drum and bass drive, and it fits the song perfectly. The bass is also adjusted to fit the faster groove here, and I love how chopped up and stuttered the music feels overall during this section. The result is an awesome reimagining and reorchestration of this already solid song. It's refreshing to see a great VIP for a great song. I feel like a lot of electronic artists don't really make VIPs anymore. Anyway, we transition into track number 19, which is entitled The Whole Part 1. This is a wonderful atonal intro for the song at the beginning. I imagine that this is what the mind of a computer sounds like. It's very warped and surreal in terms of sound design. There's a large sense of space. It's almost as if we're staring out at a cold and windy cyberpunk city landscape. The music swells very beautifully into that drop, and once we do hit that drop, it's almost like you're in the middle of that busy city in the future, just standing in an alley seeking shelter from a raging thunderstorm coming from above. The drop consists of the crispy layered drums, a punchy sub bass, and there's these cool clicking sounds that are pitched to evoke a sense of melody. They feel metallic, as if someone were hitting on cans and pans and other surfaces. After the break beat fades out, the mix expands with smooth and triumphant synth strings. It almost feels like a Tangerine Dream tune at this part, if you're familiar with their music. They've done a lot of music for soundtracks and other sorts of ambient type projects. It's very cold, wet with reverb, and it's like you're floating in the cosmos. Finally, we reach track number 20, which is entitled Closer. The closing track shares the same energy as the intro track, and it almost feels like a digital curtain meeting the cybernetic curtain at the other end of the stage. We've got quiet and warped synths with interesting filters and effects. It's cold, it's empty, and the track eventually fades into nothingness. It's as if the camera is panning away and zooming out slowly, letting you know that it's time to leave the movie theater and go home. The show is over. Overall, this is a beautifully mesmerizing album. In my eyes, it is a true masterclass for sound design and good dance music. Most of the cuts are drum and bass, but the trio do provide listeners with glimpses and tastes of other styles and scenes. I'd say it's a cohesive journey into a futuristic sound for electronic music. While the album does sit on the longer side, I really do. I believe it's worth your time if you enjoy this type of sound. It's the kind of album that rewards the patient listener with all sorts of pleasant surprises. Each track is distinct and full of character, and honestly, it's a bittersweet goodbye to this stellar group. I mean, Noisia has always represented fearless innovation and experimentation to me. And they've left their mark on me both as a music lover and as a music producer. I do wish the guys the best of luck in their future endeavors, and I just have to say thank you for the music, and thank you for all of the memories. And yeah, those are all my thoughts on this album. If you have sat here and listened to me talk about Noisia and their farewell final album entitled Closure, I really have to say thank you, because no one asked you to sit here and listen to me talk about them. But here we are. And with that being said, if you have any new music that you really, really want to share with somebody, I am anxious to find new music nowadays, so please send that my way, and I'll make sure to take my time to listen to it. And once again, I just want to say thank you for watching, and I hope that you have a very wonderful day.